Hi everyone, and welcome to the second live panel of Launching New Ventures, and a course on, and we have a panel that arrived exactly in time. So this is a panel on guerrilla marketing and growth hacking, and it is part of our panel series, which accompanies our free online course on Coursera. The course itself is 5 weeks, and we've created these panels with expert entrepreneurs in the field to share their experiences and give you some concrete examples to work with as you learn about entrepreneurship from our two professors, Marc Gruber and Chris Tucci. So as a reminder, the course is five weeks long with 3 weeks for you to finish working on your projects. And at the end of the course, we're going to look at the top performers and award 3 2,500 seed funding amounts. Just a reminder, throughout this panel, use social media. On Twitter, we'll be monitoring the hashtag LNV15, and we'll be pulling your comments and questions throughout the panel. So that would be great to hear your feedback. So without further ado, let me introduce our amazing panelists. Really, I'm so pleased to have these guys on board. I think I tweeted a while ago that I was thinking of the experts in the world on growth hacking and guerrilla marketing, and I would have chosen these guys, and they all accepted to be on the panel. So that's amazing. So let me start on the left. We have DJ Saul, who's with us from Washington, D.C. DJ is not a DJ, it's just his first name, DJ. So he's a CMO of a company called iStrategyLabs. They started out small, and now they're growing quite big. They were recently named an Ad Age 2014 Small Agency of the Year. So DJ has written for the Next Web and taught also at General Assembly. He's worked for a number of large and small companies that you'll hear from later on in the course. Then we have Professor Marc Gruber. So Marc is, first of all, he's my PhD supervisor, and he's one of the instructors of Launching New Ventures. Marc is one of the world's leading entrepreneurship scholars. He has over 15 years of experience researching and shaping the field. He's won a number of awards, including 3 times receiving the Thought Leader Award by the Entrepreneurship Division of the Academy of Management. So the Academy of Management publishes the Academy of Management Journal, which is the top-rated empirical journal in management. And he is also really passionate about entrepreneurial marketing and has been teaching weeks 1, 2, and 3 of the course, and will be making appearances in weeks 4 and 5. Next, we have another Marc, but this one's spelled with a K, Marc Kaigwa, who's joining us. Are you from Nairobi right now? Marc Kaigwa, so he is talking to us from Nairobi, Kenya. So Marc is a founder of Nendo, a strategy and storytelling consultancy for digital Africa. He has published a number of reports, including the most cited report on social media in Africa. Marc is a Forbes 30 Under 30 Best Young Entrepreneur of Africa, and he received that title in 2013. And then last but not least, we have Mattan Griffel. Mattan is also a 30 Under 30 in education. His startup is called 1 Month. It was backed by Y Combinator, and he is also the founder of GrowthHack and an expert in growth hacking. So we'll be hearing a lot from him later on. And actually, right after our webinar, you might be able to catch his webinar, but we have him now, so let's get straight into it. So Marc, this seminar is called, and Marc Gruber, Professor Marc Gruber, this seminar is called Guerrilla Marketing and Growth Hacking. But before we get into these 2 specific types of marketing, can you give us a broad overview of what is marketing, and why is it important to think of entrepreneurial marketing as a different thing?
Yeah, so welcome everyone, and I look forward to this panel very much. Also, thank you very much for being here with me on that panel. So about marketing, and those who have seen the MOOC so far have not seen the marketing part yet. So all these things that I will be telling you will do to the viewers. So how we define marketing, and that's congruent with how the field, most of the field defines it, is the establishment of exchange relationships. So you want to have beneficial exchange relationships, and in a marketing context that can be, not only with your customers, but with various constituencies, various stakeholders around you. What you typically focus on in a startup context is you exchange relationships with your customers, because they are vital to the success of your firm, to the revenue generation, to the growth of your company. One topic we will discussing later on is growth hacking, how you can accelerate your growth with a venture by piggybacking, for instance, on other firms' marketing efforts, growth efforts, etc. What we typically look at in marketing is more the strategic components, like how you position your firm, how your customer should perceive your company vis-a-vis competing firms, and how you segment the market. Which market segments are your core segments, which market segments might be adjacent segments. And then you have more of the operational types of decisions that are building on these strategic types of decisions, which then mean which type of pricing, which type of distribution, which type of promotion activities. So if we talk about guerrilla marketing and growth hacking today, you could say, well, these are more of the operational types of activities that you engage in, but they have actually some fundamental strategic implications, because if you achieve growth through your marketing activities, that means you're also fulfilling, getting closer to your strategic goals.
Thanks very much, Marc. So it seems like marketing is the creation of beneficial relationships. So you're working to create a community or an ecosystem of valuable relationships, either with your client, with your producers, or with the general public, so that your venture will be a success. So then you're talking about guerrilla marketing or viral marketing, which I would say still falls into the definition of marketing as the generation of beneficial long-term relationships with important groups. But then growth hacking has a bit of a different flavor, and I guess that's part of the term growth hacking. You're hacking your way towards growth. Maybe it's a more direct approach. So Mattan, maybe you want to pitch in. Would you say growth hacking falls under marketing? What's the desired goal of growth hacking?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of confusion around this, partly because growth hacking as a field is so early that it hasn't been defined yet, and it doesn't quite have the thought leaders, the books, the proponents. I think that there's a lot of overlap. So when we think typically of marketing, we're thinking about promoting or selling products, right? And that often has these fields such as sales, advertising, like managing your brand, doing research, doing digital marketing, those kind of traditional marketing ideas. And then there's obviously some stuff that's like pushing the edges, like guerrilla marketing, social campaigns, and things like that. Growth hacking is kind of this, it's a recognition of the fact that the startups that have been able to grow very quickly have done so by realizing that growth is driven not just by your marketing efforts, but by other things that go beyond marketing, like how the actual product is developed, what features are developed into the product, and how you think about the entire interaction. It used to be that marketing is very siloed from product and very siloed from some of the other business decisions. And at a startup, you get to think more holistically about like not only where are people coming from, but how do we onboard them properly within the product so that they're more likely to come back later. And it's an understanding of the fact that it's not just about the number of people coming to your website, but it's ultimately about how many active users do you have, and how many of those active users are actually, being monetized, right? So growth hacking has these questions around like how do we increase lifetime value of a user? How do we further engage users? And so it is a lot more cross-functional than marketing would be. But the reason why it's confusing is because when you look specifically at growth hacks, they often look like things that have already been done before in other fields. When you look at one growth hack, it looks like something that maybe a marketer would have done, or it looks like something that a product person would have done. What's new is the broader level of how companies think about this, and also how it affects, honestly, the organizational structure within the company.
Right. So what I'm hearing from you, thanks Mattan for that clears things up a little bit. It is definitely a really new concept, but very popular. So here's a pro tip: if you want your tweet to be retweeted and so forth, just hashtag growth hacking. A very popular topic. So what I'm hearing,
well, that's because there's a lot of bots out there that will retweet those.
Exactly. They figured maybe that's a way for quick exposure and retweets. But so what I'm hearing from you is that traditionally in a larger company, the marketing function was silent. So someone would create a product, say, okay, now the product's done. You marketers think of creative ads and pour in a lot of money for televisions, ads or billboard space or pop-ups and so forth. Whereas now, growth hacking wants to start even at the core of the product. So how can I make my product either collaborative, social, inherently viral, and also sticky? So increase the costs of switching so that people, once they use the product, don't want to switch and use a competitor's product. Okay, so that's something to think about, and we'll come back to that. I wanted to move to Marc. So Marc Kaigwa, so you're joining us from Nairobi. Can you talk to us a bit about what Lendo tries to do with community engagement, taking advantage of the mobile penetration in Nairobi, and any ways that you see the interaction between this community building through social media and growth hacking? Oh no, you're on mute, Marc. You're on mute.
Or the microphone's not working.
Or the microphone's not working. We can try and come back to you. Do you have, maybe you can use your phone or something like this? Because we can't hear you at all. Okay, so we can't hear you at all. Maybe you can try disconnecting it and reconnecting. So I'll come back to you, Marc, in 30 seconds or so. Since Mattan has to leave us again, I wanted to ask a question. You were talking about products and how the product is created to be inherently viral in itself. So growth hacking is often associated with software startups. Is this true? Can growth hacking also be applied to other types of ventures?
Yeah, I think it is. In the same way that often innovations happen in one field and then are carried over to other fields, growth hacking happened in software startups mostly out of necessity because these companies didn't have the kind of resources that they needed to do traditional marketing. So they didn't have the money to be able to afford billboard ads or television ads or the kind of things a bigger company would do. And then also the needs were different. Like, you can't do this broad sweeping sort of branding strategy for a startup because you don't even know enough about your users to know what makes sense, and anything you would come up with maybe a month later would already be irrelevant. So, the needs there are for rapid iteration, for building products that will grow themselves and essentially get you like users and active users more cheaply, and just require you to think about that instead of being able to just throw lots of resources at the problem. And so the same ways that these companies kind of figured out and they innovated around the idea of, well, how can we use social networks, for example, to grow faster, or how can we really think about like onboarding our users to create the ideal first experience, or how do we use email to get people to come back later, right, so that they become more active. Now these are things that bigger companies are starting to take and to be aware of, because when a company is small, it's easy to just sort of ignore what they're doing. But as a company grows and then potentially threatens a big competitor in the space that doesn't have the same kind of tools and resources, or isn't using the same kind of like tools to grow that fast, they start to look at that. And I think it's also kind of a reflection of like, how can these bigger companies structure and borrow some of the process around what the smaller companies are doing to make themselves faster and more agile and more attuned to what people actually want.
Okay, great. So what I'm hearing from you is that there's some techniques to use email and social networks to try and increase traffic back to your site or back to your product. And maybe this is something that is much cheaper with software-based products, and also just more natural for software companies to do versus larger companies.
Yeah.
So I think Marc Kaigwa is trying to sort of technical problem. Marc, if you can speak, go ahead. And if not, I'm going to turn back to Marc Gruber, and DJ, feel free to pop in if you'd like. Maybe one thing would be useful is to give an example of guerrilla marketing, a concrete example of guerrilla marketing, and then a concrete example of growth hacking, so that it would be easier to understand.
It was quite interesting what Mattan was saying, because I think you can look at guerrilla marketing and growth hacking at smart and ways where you use your imagination instead of money, you know, in terms of trying to achieve your ends. And you know, everyone can follow a textbook approach because it's well documented. But once you're moving out of a textbook approach to marketing, you know, it's about your imagination. I think that's the beautiful side of it, because there it actually meets what entrepreneurship is, which is also a lot about imagination and what you can dream of. And that's the same flavor that we see here in guerrilla marketing and growth hacking. It's about finding new ways of doing things, unconventional ways that then have the attention of the audience.
Right, Mark, would you have an example of guerrilla marketing? This is a question from Megan in LA.
There are plenty of examples. You want to, but my best suggestion is, you know, you go on Google and type in guerrilla marketing and under picture search, because there you see lots of wonderful examples. It's starting from campaigns where you open a shop somewhere in a city where you say, okay, it might be a coffee shop. Let's put this example, and you have a little coffee mug that you glue to the top of your car and you drive around with that coffee mug, and just by virtue of the fact that this coffee mug sits on the top of your car, you know, people think, oh my God, that falls down, and when you stop it, say it doesn't fall down, so it attracts attention, you know, and it's you know, that's one flavor. You know, we have several examples, exciting examples coming up in the MOOC where we talk about, you know, showing to the public, to the audience, what you can do. Ideally, with a guerrilla marketing campaign, you combine what you do, what you have in an offering, with possibilities to attract attention. So you're always trying to link the guerrilla marketing campaign somehow to your product or service. So, you know, what we will be talking about in the MOOC, and I don't want to foreshadow too many of these examples, is, for instance, a company in Berlin where Mattan is sitting right now. They had at the Potsdamer Platz, they put up a Porsche 100 meters high, and they wanted to attract attention, and people could vote about whether this Porsche should fall down, you know, and that created a huge media hoopla, attracted a lot of attention towards that startup that was actually in the online marketing space and the cell phone marketing space. So I don't want to give away the whole example, because it's in the MOOC. So if you want to see the whole example, watch the MOOC. But you know, these are these types of examples where, of course, you have to spend a lot of money to buy a Porsche and let it drop onto Potsdamer Platz. Media time that you had purchased that way was worth probably a couple of millions. So yes, it's an investment, but the return is much, much higher. And that's, I think, where the smartness and the ingenuity comes in that defines and characterizes entrepreneurship.
Thanks, Mark. So I'm hearing imagination as a key resource that startups and that people can use when they're low on cash or other types of expertise. And then I'm also hearing from Mattan imagination in a different sense, so not only creating an event like hanging a Porsche 100 meters above a public square, but rather how can I make my product more sticky? How can I make the product itself really viral? So I think Marc Kaigwa has his mic working again. Mark, can you give us another angle from it? So I understand that Nendo works a lot with storytelling and community building through social media. Doesn't work.
I can pretend to be Mark here. Mark, if you just move your mouth, I will just talk over you.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Okay, so maybe we can think of either, Mark, we tweet your thing, or you can send me in this group chat what you'd like to say, or we can try and find another solution here. So we're going to let Mark try again. Let's go back to some other questions from the group. So we had another one that's directed at DJ Saul. How does a small startup with limited resources effectively use the web to reach the right target market and seriously compete against the established giants? So DJ, I know that your company works for large and small companies, and you yourself have been described as an invaluable pillar of support for DC's aspiring entrepreneurs. So what advice would you have to give Glenn Marshall from South Africa?
Sure. So, hey guys, I think the first thing I would say is manage your own expectations. So the weight of that question with regard to competing, if you're a small beverage company and you want to compete with Coca-Cola, I wouldn't say that it's impossible, certainly, to launch with a splash and create a massive amount of attention and achieve global awareness in a short period of time. Totally possible, but with regard to longer-term competition with the largest brands on the world, I would manage your expectations in terms of what's certainly possible in an arms race for marketing dollars, so to speak. But I actually do think that the first 20 minutes or so here have underscored some really interesting principles that I would absolutely agree with regard to leveraging your imagination where you might be lacking in short-term dollars that you might be able to spend. A lot of what I start to recommend that people do, in addition to talking and sharing their ideas about potential activations or campaigns with as many people as possible, because that's where better ideas come from in the first place, is leverage your local universities. So there are a lot of, around the world certainly, but I've been in DC for almost 11 years at this point, and I've gotten rather close with a lot of the marketing and advertising programs that run their own competitions, and there are teams of young, hungry students with awesome ideas who, depending on their alignment with your product or brand, are typically willing to focus their efforts on your project, and that might be for school credit, or it might be a part-time paid gig, or anything in between. But I've seen a lot of relatively successful campaigns just leverage local entrepreneurial minds in their local universities. So whether that goes into guerrilla marketing and you're talking about, excuse me, an army of 100 sorority girls handing out little coupons, and I have some fun examples of what we've done along those lines, or it's purely digital and tapping into some of the growth hacking bag of tricks that Mattan can speak to and others can speak to with regard to creating a digital street team of sorts. That's also certainly achievable with local talent. So I would first recommend looking local and seeing what resources are available to you with regard to quickly scaling up an army of young, hungry talent that can be deployed online and off. So I would start there, and then I can get into some of my examples maybe a little bit later, but I think, again, leveraging the imagination and taking an entrepreneurial tack to your marketing initiatives is absolutely the best way to do it. And it's great if you have $500,000 to deploy on a campaign, but if you don't, I don't think that's a deal breaker. There's plenty you can do.
Thanks, DJ. So we had a lot of actually requests for interesting examples. So if it's all right with the panel, why don't we go through them now? I'm wondering if you can see on the big screen the DJ's presentation.
Works nicely, yeah.
Okay, great. So DJ, take it away.
Cool. So hey guys, this is the building that I'm currently sitting in right now. So we are in our brand new office space. It's a former Wonder Bread factory. So we got a cool space here in DC. Come and visit if you're in town. As Netra mentioned, we were one of Ad Age's Small Agencies of the Year last year. Hopefully again this year. So we have 4 teams: design, development, strategy, and hardware. Now the hardware angle is what I really want to focus on for the next 5 or 6 minutes here. So these are electrical and mechanical engineers. So these are not folks that I thought we would be hiring 2 years ago in our 7-year company journey, but these are folks that are sitting next to our designers, developers, and strategists to build prototypes and connected hardware. Really, really exciting stuff with regard to the maker movement, or the making movement, and the Internet of Things. Just a quick snapshot of some of the folks that we work with. Again, work with a lot of big brands, but startups as well. Sweetgreen on there, a lot of brands that were small that are growing very, very quickly. So a quick highlight of some of the stuff that we've been doing. So we're actually doing a lot of work with Facebook right now. So we're building connected devices and prototypes specifically to connect fans with celebrities. So the mentions box is something that we're rolling out at big tier events, getting these devices in celebrities' hands to pull in live feeds from Facebook and allow them interact with a physical object to record a video back to their fans that are following them closely at live events. This is cut off a little bit, but again, I mentioned connected devices and prototypes, so you can go back to that cooler. So this cooler is triggered either by social media or by proximity with Bluetooth. So this all-in component costs were about $250 US total. The most expensive component of this thing is actually the fake ice cubes that you can see inside there. Those are like $1 per, ironically enough. But with an Arduino, Raspberry Pi, BeagleBone, there's a lot of really affordable components of the Internet of Things ecosystem now that you can cobble together to build something. So this cooler pops open physically with a certain threshold of social media hits. So whether it's 10 tweets or 1 million Facebook likes or 5 Snapchats or whatever it is, anything with an API, an application programming interface that we can tap into, we can trigger a physical effect. So Mark was talking about the Porsche dropping down on the crane in the square, right? So that could be votes, that could be live stream, and it could be triggered by votes, could also be triggered by social media. A lot of awesome activations have been done. Well, not a lot. I'd say a handful of awesome activations have been done along these lines. A one for the Game of Thrones Season 5 launch in New Zealand. It had a statue of King Joffrey, a much loathed and hated character historically. So they had a statue of King Joffrey. I don't have a picture of it here. I'm just describing it to you guys. In a square, and there was a rope tied around his waist, and there was signage that said, with 1 million tweets, the statue would be toppled. So every tweet, like a wheel would crank, and he would go further and further and further, and then on the 1 millionth tweet, it would topple over. So this sort of weird, awesome moment that was live streamed to the world, just triggered by social media. So we can keep ticking through these here. The selfie mirror. This is an interesting one that started just as a prototype. So again, just hard costs here, all in. Sorry, I'm a little sick. Hard costs here, a couple $100 US. And we built a prototype of a magical Twitter mirror with LEDs embedded behind it, a Raspberry Pi powering the software. So it uses a motion sensor and facial recognition using OpenCV, again, cobbling together open source software and relatively cost-effective components to build this prototype of a mirror that takes your photo when you stand in front of it and automatically push it to Facebook or Twitter or social media. So it's a content capturing machine. So we've done a number of different versions of these things. And speaking of, we're talking about software and software products lending themselves more often than not to virality, right? So this is a piece of hardware that is itself a viral machine in a way. Another 3D printed device that we made, tapping into, well, not tapping into Domino's Pizza, but actually creating our own API wrapper to do an auto order mechanism. So you just push this button and it automatically triggers your favorite pizza order. So we didn't actually do this for Domino's. We did this for ourselves and got a fair amount of attention and press. I think there's huge appetite for sort of that garage-built prototype that actually does work, and it's in that never-been-done-before category. So if you, as your startup or small venture, can build something, and again, I'm showing a lot of physical devices and gadgets that might seem a little either niche or might seem a little gimmicky, but at the end of the day, creating something that has never been done before that represents your brand or helps to sell your product, that's really what captures attention, I would say. Lastly, just to round out more of a picture of what I do every day and what we do, we're the social media agency of record for many brands, so Hendrick's Gin being one of my favorites. And then lastly, we do a lot of design and development. So I mentioned our full teams on the design and development side allow us to quickly deploy things when it comes to working with our maker squad on connected hardware. All right, a couple super quick case studies. I'll try and keep this to just a couple more minutes. Cool, let's blast through. All right, so Honest Tea. So I mentioned the example of a beverage company earlier. So this was about 2 years before Honest Tea was actually acquired by Coca-Cola, but this was still when they were, I'd say, relatively small, but certainly, I think, technically not a startup at this point. They're already 3 or 4 years old and had already raised some money, but I will say from experience that they keep their marketing efforts rather lean at the end of the day. This one, however, was one of their they're bigger spends and efforts, but I hope that it's inspiring for even folks that are trying to run on a shoestring budget. So this was a 10-city stunt, so it could certainly have been one city, but a website you would go to, honestcities.com, it would locate your IP, know where you are, so it'd say, oh, you're in New York City, here's the New York City live stream feed, and what you're looking at, it might be a little blurry, but there's a kiosk with tea and a bunch of bottles, and then a jar where you could put in $1, and you could either steal the tea, you could just take the tea, or you could buy it by putting $1 in the jar and then taking the tea, and on the live stream, you're just watching voyeuristically who's doing what. So sort of a social experiment, if you will. And then the digital hook, as you can see, you can either be honest or dishonest. If you are being honest, you like the brand on Facebook and you get a $1 off coupon. If you're being dishonest, you just get the $1 off coupon and you don't have to like them on social. So again, the digital component of said social experiment. And then on the left, if you can see, we were ranking the cities in relation to each other of who was the most honest and who was the least honest. I think it's cut off, but the least honest cities are Washington, D.C. and New York City, unfortunately.
There you go.
Yes, there's some screenshots. Here's some of the statistics that we got, if you want to just go back to that real quick. We doubled their Facebook presence in 24 hours, got on the Today Show, hundreds of thousands of media mentions, huge, huge success.
So this is a great example of you using social media with some imagination and some physical in-person activities.
For sure. And one of the key metrics here being email capture. I think Mattan and others can certainly speak to email still being a gold mine of a marketing metric, whereas a lot of folks typically get maybe hyper-focused on Facebook likes or Twitter mentions. Those are all great and can be great, especially if that's part of what you're currently focused on in your marketing efforts. But capturing emails and being able to remarket to those still remains toward the top of the food chain at the end of the day, I would argue, and that's coming from someone who hawks social media every day of my life. But yeah, 75,000 emails captured in the course of this campaign turned out to be one of our biggest wins. Let's power through the last few here real quick. So this one, again, larger budget, but we could have scaled this down and done it for less. And this is a type of idea that I like to think is indicative of where integrated campaigns and even stunt and guerrilla marketing is going, and that's leveraging live stream. So it's a little bit cut off, but what you should be looking at, that's fine, you can focus on this. So this is a behind the scenes, and then that next one is a live stream feed of a set that we built out, and you as the visitor to this microsite, you take a quick quiz, and whoever wins gains control of a baseball pitching machine. Stay with me. It's an apple launcher. So this is for Red's Apple Ale, a Miller Coors beverage. This was right as they launched the beverage to the world last year. So this was part of their brand awareness effort. Whoever wins control gets to use their arrow keys to aim, spacebar to fire, to shoot they're like little red hockey pucks, but they're supposed to be apples, right? So you're shooting these apples at these targets. Everything is connected to the internet, so the targets, depending on which one you hit, it would trigger a different prize, whether it's Amazon value dollars or T-shirts or gear or whatever it is. And if you're noticing at the top, it says Player Taylor H. So you're authenticating with Facebook here. So at the end of the day, this was really just a Facebook sweepstakes that happened to be live streamed to the world. No worries. Yeah, that next one you could see what the quiz looked like. So whoever this would pop up only to people currently live on the microsite, so at their computer. Whoever clicks doctor, which is the right answer, fastest, would potentially win control and win a prize. So we've done a number of these types of activations where it's really a social sweepstakes, just happens to be playing out in the real world, in real life. And just by the nature of that type of a campaign, leveraging something like a live stream, and being able to control something in physical space from your phone or from your computer, that in and of itself is so new and weird and different that it had a healthy amount of earned media just around the campaign itself. And I mentioned rather larger budget for sure, but that type of a campaign could certainly be executed for very few dollars if you think about the power of something like Periscope and the bright future of live streaming and what's possible there. So the last example I'll just hit real quick. I just it's cut off, but you would see a pink ping pong ball. Just zoom out there. That's fine. It's the last slide anyways. So this is what I mentioned earlier. Locally, leveraging 100 sorority girls to take and seed these ping pong balls out all around this area where the store was opening. So Pinkberry frozen yogurt chain, we launched all of their East Coast stores. So Pinkberry was already a large brand, but the individual store launches were almost like individual small business launches or startup launches themselves. So what we did was we had a variable data code, a random code, and a URL printed onto these ping pong balls, and we had these sorority girls hide them in fountains, hide them in grocery stores, hide them at yoga studios all around town, and people would find them in the weeks leading up to the grand opening event, go to the URL, which is a Facebook event page, show up to the event, bring the ping pong ball back, read off their code to see if they won. So sort of a longer standing real life sweepstakes. And leveraging the sorority girls, it was part of, we made a donation to their charity for a couple $1,000s, and they loved it. They were happy to do it. A lot of them were marketing students in the first place. So that's a pretty key example, I think, of leveraging a physical media object that pushes to digital and has an element of reality, while also leveraging talent and garnering a workforce for a mere several $1,000s. So I think I'll stop there. I know a lot of you want to talk about startups or small businesses, where I've focused mostly on larger brands, but my point here is to inspire what's possible and also underline some of the points that were made earlier with regard to leveraging imagination, if not dollars.
Thanks, DJ.
Can I quickly follow up on what DJ was saying, because I think it's an interesting observation. Because we are talking about entrepreneurial marketing and startup marketing as well, and you mentioned these examples for the larger brands, and I think that's an interesting observation that the larger brands have now, or the larger corporations have built on these ideas that originated in the startup world, like guerrilla marketing and entrepreneurial marketing, because they see that this leverage exists, that they need to find unconventional ways. They find new ways to cut through the jungle of information that hits everyone daily, and to create the attention, to make something new that attracts the attention.
Absolutely.
And I think that these are wonderful examples, and I think they are very relevant to the launching new venture MOOC in that sense, because these are examples that are not only, if they work for an established company, they will work also for a startup.
Right. I guess the key thing here is being entrepreneurial in the marketing doesn't mean you have to, doesn't say anything about what size company you have to be. Right. So these are great examples, and the students are asking if we can make these slides available. So hopefully you'll have that. Yeah. But the other things that I'm drawing from you are that email is still a very important channel. What's interesting with the Pinkberry example is that you leveraged a sorority network, so therefore you're already starting off with an existing base. And what's great is that you had then lines of people waiting outside these Pinkberry shops, which for a startup is very helpful, because you're starting out new, you have no reputation, and if someone walks down the street and sees a huge line in front of your store, that's already increased legitimacy for you as a young company. So I think finally, now we can move to Marc Kaigwa. So we've been talking about email and a mix of different channels. Marc, you work a lot with social media and community building. What would you want to share in terms of how Nando views marketing?
Right. Well, thanks, and I'm hoping that finally you guys can hear me now. Thank goodness. Well, great presentation, DJ, and it's great to be here. I think one of the interesting things that we're glad to bring out and highlight oftentimes is an emerging market perspective. So something that often goes unrecognized, but is as much a part of marketing as anything else, is this idea of leapfrogging, that the businesses that get to start out today have, in some ways, some kind of intrinsic advantage, really, from the amount of content that's out there. People like DJ work hard to make sure that there's case studies of some of their work, and this goes towards clients and the social proof that they can do things and push boundaries. You have Mattan, who has a growth hacking course that he's actually a free one and a paid one over at 1 month, for example. And this means that kind of people are starting much further down the continuum than they could have been 5 to 10 years ago, which is, I think, one of the most encouraging things. I think that same tune of leapfrogging can actually help you kind of take out a whole number of essential steps in either getting to your consumer or building up an audience. I know one of the things that we've seen around Kenya, for example, and East Africa, and certainly emerging markets. I was looking at some statistics today, and I'd be happy to send some, I'll put some in the comments. WhatsApp, I saw only about 8% of the US was using it, and this was as of 2014, so the statistic might be a bit old. But in a place like South Africa, 78% of people with a mobile internet connection have and actively use WhatsApp. That's according to Statista.com. And in that case, what you're saying, and we saw this last year, we saw the move towards WhatsApp commerce. Now, this is an instant messenger, you know, it's not the place you would associate with an opportunity for somebody to build community. But if you think about emerging markets, that people started off largely with mobile phones and consequently the internet. So you now have, for example, this one phone we went out and purchased just really because we could. It's a what? It's a, I say like an $8 smartphone, and comes with WhatsApp baked in. It runs pretty well, and so what you're looking at there is somebody who all they had their whole lives perhaps was a mobile phone number, and now they just upgraded and got the internet. They get on Google and so on and so forth, and they're looking for a range of goods, services, and opportunities to join communities, and WhatsApp tends to be one of the first places. The slightly weird thing about that at times is how, I guess you can find, WhatsApp is very similar to MSN or Yahoo or AOL back in the days. You have everything from chain mail to very random forwards and people telling you about, you know, it's about to be hellfire and destruction if you don't kind of, you know, pass this forward. But the things people are doing with emoji, for example, and we've been able to see people set up almost fully functioning stores and have, I guess this is perhaps a sense of guerrilla marketing itself, the only marketing channel they're available on is WhatsApp. So it's led us on this side to create a tool. I think WhatsApp are going to come up with this eventually, but that allowed businesses to kind of have a CRM and essentially 10 seats at the table to work with managing what are essentially anything from dozens to thousands of notifications. And I think that's only a beginning to what it looks like, for example, here where you see phones are a gateway now to essentially the first touch point for a lot of people. And in Kenya and Africa, you have people with one primary device, so not 2 or 3 as perhaps developed markets would do. And that in and of itself creates a sense of discipline. The place of SMS hasn't gone anywhere. It's still tried and trusted and true in the same way you might say that email might be. Email, however, is stronger. I think it delivers better over time. Just the fact that somebody has an email here also opens up a range of ways you can engage them. It's what many of us would consider the digital passport to the world, and a way for you to build communities outside of, let's say, what might be the big 4 or 5 social networks out there. So one of the things I know has been excited to watch here is people adopting and really leapfrogging from very basic SMS technology to fully formed kind of mobile stores that have flash sales that happen on WhatsApp with images. And that to me, I think, strikes that the more case studies you write, which is something we don't often do, you're just kind of busy doing stuff and not taking pause to say this is something that's come and this is relevant to somebody in Malaysia, relevant to someone in Singapore, relevant to someone in Bogota and Colombia, wherever it is. You tend to find that there's very similar things about emerging markets now, and provided you take the time to look, because in my opinion, the majority of learning of really material out there, and it's part of why I'm excited about the Venture MOOC as well, is around perhaps might bring what could be a Western philosophy. I think the opportunity with the MOOC is to customize to your respective market and get out and do experiments. Whereas if you just kind of sit and do like a bit of desk research, you may end up kind of skewing yourself towards what might be someone else's environment and assumptions.
Thanks so much, Mark. So yeah, we heard from DJ that email and all these other social media platforms can be useful, but that it's very important to tailor the channel that you're using to the people that you want to reach. So it was really useful for you to share these comments. Actually, 40% of the people who are registered for this course are from emerging markets. So hopefully your comments will be really relevant to them. What I found interesting in what you were saying was this idea of WhatsApp commerce. So we were talking before of social media and email as a way to reach people and tell them about our product, get them to buy the service. But here you're saying that the social media platform itself is the store. So you just want them to get to that WhatsApp group or Facebook page or Instagram and make the purchases directly there. So I've heard of these trends before, F-commerce, I-commerce, WhatsApp commerce. Now this is a new one. And then DJ also mentioned new apps called Periscope and Meerkat, which allow you to do live streaming directly from your phone. So there are definitely a lot of interesting channels opening up. I wanted to move to another question. We have another 15 minutes here. This one is from Bismarck, who is based in Ghana. And his question is, how will I know if my marketing strategy is yielding effective results or not? So Mattan or Marc Gruber, would you want to pitch in on that?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the things that has emerged in the last few years that's actually allowed the smaller startups to pretty effectively compete against the bigger ones is kind of like the I don't know what the right term is, but like I guess the accessibility of technology that used to be very expensive, right? Big brands used to be able to have a huge competitive advantage because they would have teams of data scientists, they would have access to technology that cost thousands or tens of thousands of dollars like a month, and that's something that startups didn't really get. And then sorry about that. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
And then you have the emergence of these tracking tools. Google Analytics even, sort of one of the first ones that anyone could plug into their product and could suddenly get a pretty good picture of what was going on. And then, but that was mostly about page views, and then stuff like Mixpanel and Kissmetrics, and now there's a whole proliferation of these things that are very cheap, but make it possible effectively to track almost everything. Right, and that's one of the things that growth hackers have actually figured out, is that we now have the means to figure out the answers to these questions that have never before really been able to answer, like, should I be focusing on traditional PR or going after bloggers? You know, that's like a tricky question, and it actually kind of depends on your context. It depends on your product. It depends on your target market, and you can now know that because you can try both. You could see which one is actually yielding, you know, the most traffic or the most qualified customers, following them all the way down the marketing funnel, not only to go into your site, but signing up and then becoming engaged users and then giving you money. And at the end of the day, like, that's what actually matters to you. So part of the creativity around growth hacking has been really clever ways to think about actually measuring the value of what you're doing, which, you know, can be hard to do, but now there's technology that makes it a lot easier.
And I think when I just can jump in here, I think this is quite an important observation, because when you think about the world out there, it's large companies with lots of marketing budget versus the smaller companies with hardly any marketing budget. And a lot of questions that we received in advance to this panel actually steered into this direction. You know, how can you actually be competitive as a small company or a startup company when you are facing all these big competitors? So guerrilla marketing and these imaginative approaches are one answer, but what you just said, Mattan, is the other part of this answer. Is just to be, we are now able with all these tools out there as startups to be very efficient and effective in terms of our marketing campaigns, and we do not waste any dollars, you know, or hardly any dollars. That means we can target much more our customers, get more return from our marketing dollars, and thus have in a way another type of weapon in this competitive fight vis-a-vis other established companies.
That's really interesting. So we're talking now about what's possible. We had DJ talk about the smart hardware that you can set up with very little investment that become curious objects that attract attention. And then Mattan, you're talking about trying and testing assumptions and seeing whether this approach or that approach is effective. Before, we couldn't know that until months or until a product failed. But now we can get instant feedback through A/B testing and a lot of other techniques. So I have another question for our panel from Ryan, who is based in New York. He talks about how impactful, well, he wants to know how impactful word of mouth is these days. So that was the traditional marketing gold nugget, getting people to talk about your product. Is that still valid, or is it present in a different way?
Hey, yeah, I think it never went away. I think it's still wildly valid. I think thinking about the different channels and targeting your audience effectively today, I think it still comes back to word of mouth. It's just digital word of mouth. It's online word of mouth. It's leveraging social media as your mechanism for word of mouth. So I hold strong that it still is here. It still is real. It still is everything, for sure.
Great.
One of the best ways I've seen for thinking about word of mouth, because as things go digital, it's easy to track something when it's happening online. It's hard to track when someone's talking about your product at like a bar or as like a dinner and telling your friends about it. I mean, that's just like fundamentally very difficult for you as a brand to actually tag and to follow that along. But a lot of people and brands have been tracking something called Net Promoter Score for a very long time, but I've started to see a lot of brands start to track Net Promoter Score. And Net Promoter Score is essentially, it's a very simple question, just how likely are you to recommend this product to your friends on a scale of 1 to 10, right? And then there's a way of taking that, so the 9s and 10s are your promoters, the 6s and belows are your detractors, and you just subtract percentage of people who are promoters from detractors, right? It seems very simple, and yet what it allows you to do essentially is to say, for example, release a certain product feature to a subset of your users, and then track, does that feature increase the likelihood that someone's going to be recommending your product or not? Mm-hmm. And now you have this objective of word of mouth marketing, and you can start to see, are we going there? It's always good to have people want to talk about your product, right? And there are tools like, particularly Qualaroo is a good one, that allows you to ask within your application, your website, questions like that, and Promoter.io I think is another one that uses email to ask like the Net Promoter Score question. So just one example of actually taking something that used to be very hard to actually measure and creating a framework around it and for using it within like a development cycle.
And Nettery just mentioned, is it still relevant? I would say it's even more relevant if first of course it's the bigger reach of this word of mouth. It can travel faster, but that's only one component. The other component, I think, it's the trust component. If you get word of mouth referrals from people you trust, that's in a digital age where you don't know oftentimes the other party or the company very well. I think that trust, that the relationship with your friends conveys, then carries over towards the trust towards that brand that is referred to. So I think the trust component together with the broader reach are two extremely important components in the word of mouth and in the digital age.
Yes, this reminds me of this famous cartoon, you don't know you're talking to a dog on the internet. So you really need to hear the recommendation come from a trusted person. What I'm also hearing, Mattan, from you is that there are a lot of tools now to help you measure Net Promoter Score, but also the traditional way of just getting the delivery person to carry a paper survey with them and get people to mark, are you satisfied with this? Are you likely to recommend this to others? It is still a valid way to do it, although you mentioned maybe there are some measurement errors. It's still a first step. And I guess I would add there that you can also then integrate incentives for your own marketing staff to become better promoters, and say that if your clients are grading these guys 9 or 10 out of 10, then you get a bonus, you get a raise. So these are all interesting ways to market. We have 6 minutes left in our panel. I wanted to ask one more question to Marc Kaigwa. This is from Sylvia in Peru. And so she says, she's asking for some advice because she's talking about a venture that's located in Peru but wants to go worldwide, wants to launch internationally. Would you have any advice for her on the sequence that she should consider? Because we were talking now about local groups, so WhatsApp groups, then a broader reach through email and so forth. Would you have any comments for her on the sequence that she should take to prioritize the markets?
Well, interesting question. Of course, there's a great deal of info that could help. So what's for example, like the industry and so on. But I'll try to give maybe some, just a couple points to consider. I think with the web today, in many ways, the second you have any kind of address that starts with www, you are, in a sense, global. So the first is to look and consider yourself very much a global company from the beginning, and all that does is that it raises your ambition in how you describe yourself, where you're going, the way you even write the copy about what you've done and how you've done it. So for her in Peru, for example, I'd ask, if I'm sitting here in Nairobi and I Google her as a founder, am I going to find something that, for example, is in Spanish perhaps, or English as well? And so if I'm set to consider her for someone to be a potential partner, what would that look like? And so she could work backwards essentially from saying, I want to be in these 3 countries before the end of 2017, and say, okay, I've gone and I've seen that these tend to be for example, some of the online communities that work with us. If you're in a particular industry and there's some working groups, sorry, I don't know if you can hear, but it's raining here. So one of the things I think she could do is work almost her online reputation backwards from, I have international partners. So what are some of the things they'd be looking to do? You could almost do essentially a digital due diligence on yourself, and anticipate information people would want. If you have a place where people can express interest in partnering with you, then what you could do is again, invite people or have selected people, maybe grant them a user and password to check out some of your information online, and so some secure documents that talk a little bit about, this is who we are, this is where we're going. Of course, you might want to look into the countries you're expecting to go to and see at the most traditional level. It doesn't work like this in every emerging market I've been, actually hardly any, but I'm learning to be more open to it. Something like the Chamber of Commerce, there's actually some interest in getting in touch with folks like that. Oftentimes what I'll do is I'll Google search some people, or I'll look for a referral to somebody who I find is interesting, either through LinkedIn and so on. But the beautiful thing, and I'll go back to her to say, is that if she is looking to be a global company, I mean, there's a lot of remotely distributed workforces in companies nowadays, and I really go back to the opening point, which is the second she could put www ahead of her whatever URL she has, she can think globally from there. It's, perhaps an English, a French translation if she's looking to go to those respective markets. And yeah, that'll be as good a place to start as any.
Thanks, Mark. So we only have a few minutes left, so I'd like to ask the panel of any closing words that or any pieces of advice that they want to give our entrepreneurs who are watching. DJ, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would repeat one of the things that I said earlier, which is strive to create and sell a message of something that has never been done before. So even if you are launching a product or a venture that already is perhaps in a crowded field or does have one or several direct competitors, create a campaign or take your messaging to a place that tells a story and has a narrative that you have something that has never been done before. And I would just underscore that 100 times, because that's what people want to hear about, that's what people want to share, that's what people want to talk about. I don't often quote or reference Seth Godin necessarily, although he is rather a brilliant man. I don't find his stuff in my daily grind, but there is something that he said 10 years ago that I think is so relevant here, and that's just the word remarkable. And he says the word remarkable defines it as something worth making a remark about. So when I say create something that has never been done before, you could say that very simply as create something remarkable.
Thanks, DJ. Mark?
Which Mark?
Marc Kaigwa.
No, I actually thought he had a great point there. I was charmed by how he put across his kind of apathy towards Mr. Godin, which I don't know. It just tickled me. I think I would definitely go with that. I think I've really found a lot of power in just taking some time to look at how you describe things online. I mean, we tend to be such an impressionable audience that many people, could and should consider what you would call their Google CV. So if you do actually share a name with a big famous person, I guess work on carving your slice of the internet and working hard to be discoverable to start. But as DJ said, if you do have the opportunity to put the internet to work for you, the best place you can start is by making sure your story is online and you kind of consistently build on it to have people follow you and buy into the story, because once they do that, even without having ever met you in person, you can end up winning some people over to you just thanks to your story.
Thanks, Marc. Mattan? Mattan, would you have some comments to add?
We lost him.
He seems to be there. Wait, maybe you're on mute. Okay, there we go.
Are you talking about me now?
Yeah.
I was just frozen for a second.
Oh,
Things were going so well. Okay, so final comments. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think I would echo what DJ said about doing things that haven't been done before, at least from the perspective of not assuming that the traditional path is like the thing that you should be doing, right? There's so many people that assume that like this is how other companies have been doing it forever, and so this is what we have to do, and that can work, but it's also never going to help you find like the really remarkable, the really innovative stuff. It'll just put you squarely in the average of what other companies are doing, and that's a really hard place to compete. But I would also say that the burden is not entirely on you to come up with the totally amazing thing on your own, but that most of the stuff is already out there if you know where to look. And so instead of being like the first, it's almost as good, if not better, to be like the first follower, like the person who identifies something that is really interesting, that stands out to you, and then to try that as well. And the startups that I see that are able, or just paying attention to what other really smart, innovative companies are doing, and borrowing something from that. Because sure, in like a marketing campaign, you don't want to copy exactly what someone else did, but when it comes to how your onboarding of your product is designed, or the way that you're asking people to share your product, or the kind of email that you send out, there are things that work. And they're not necessarily out there as case studies in textbooks because this stuff is so new. So you're going to be able to advance a lot further if you stand on the shoulders of people that have been smart and figured this out before you.
Thanks, Mattan. Marc Gruber?
So I think there's lots has been said already, and we are almost out of time here. So let me do this in a short way. It's when you think about all these statements now, I think one of the most wonderful things about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial marketing in particular is that it's very democratic. It relies on what you have in your head, what you can imagine. So it's your smartness that counts. It's not necessarily your marketing dollars, your budget, and your power status, but it's what you can imagine, what you can think of. So ultimately, I think this is a very positive message, a very reassuring message, and one that I think it's not only about entrepreneurship, but in particular relevant to entrepreneurial marketing, where you have to be smart and imaginative.
Thank you very much, Marc Gruber. And so now I'll thank all of our panelists. Thank you so much for taking time to be here today. We'll be tweeting out other relevant links. This video itself will be posted in Coursera with subtitles. We've heard so many interesting things today about how to integrate the growth aspect into your product, to be imaginative about that, but also to be imaginative about what is possible and the possible ways to get attention for your work, whether it is through some creative new thing that's never been done before, or going into the existing communities that exist. So whether it's a sorority or a WhatsApp group, and really leveraging those things around you, including your imagination. So thanks again, DJ, Marc Gruber, Marc Kaigwa, and Mattan for being here. And feel free to join the Facebook group and talk to the students directly. If you want to share more experiences, we'd be really happy to help you, to have you. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.